You're tuned into the Writing Community Chat Show, the live streaming YouTube podcast that brings you the stories of authors, screenwriters, and more. Indie or established, this show's for the community, and we invite you to be a part of it. Head to the writingcommunitychatshow.com for more info. The WCCS. Together as one, we get it done.
Hello and welcome to the Writing Community Chat Show. Hello everybody and welcome to the Writing Community Chat Show. We are here in season 17 episode. I haven't got a clue. I've completely lost track of all numbers, Chris. But we're here. We've got a great guest lined up for you and we're looking forward to tonight. So Chris, how are you doing?
Yeah, good. Obviously, is this the second show of the year? I think it might be.
It is, because we should have had Shen Teo last week, but I had a bit of a meltdown because my PC has an open mesh top and I tipped coffee into the top of it and it quite literally made some noises and stopped working. But very, very grateful that it is now back and working, so the show can continue as planned.
You had hope. The hope
Yes.
that the computer would return, and it did.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was kind of weirdly inspired by tonight's guest joining us so early. For those who don't know, he is in Australia and it's 4 a.m. in the morning there, which is kind of incredible and crazy for him to join us. But also the fact that it just 6 years is coming up and 6 years of Friday nights doing the show. So I posted a video quickly on TikTok saying about how, it's amazing. We've had so many conversations and great stories out of people in the community, and people like tonight's guest joining us at 4 a.m. It's really cool how the community just comes together to share stories and advice.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. And I've been reading Ray Bradbury's, what's it called? It's something about the Zen of writing. And if you haven't read that and you're struggling with, obviously, motivation, listen to the shows because they're great. Obviously, really good advice for getting you through. But I would recommend reading that if you're trying to get your spark back, because it's definitely helping me.
Any little tips you can think of in there? Or is that putting you on the spot?
It's put me on the spot a little bit, but one of the things he says is about nouns. And he says nouns come to his head first, and he writes them all down. But he tries to think of, like, whenever a noun comes, he just puts it on paper. And he said, and a story will come later because his brain will then start thinking about potential stories with those nouns. So he always has, like, the something. And he says, like, at first it won't come to him. So, for example, he said, like, one story was 20 years in the making.
Wow.
He wrote this title and it didn't come to him until he had an experience in life, and then he thought, oh, I'm gonna write that story, that title that I've got, I'm gonna write that. And he says it comes to him sort of like a fire, I suppose, and he just has to get it out because it's been festering for so long, that it just makes the story writing so much easier. So yeah, maybe get some nouns down.
Yeah, that's kind of links in really nicely to tonight's guest, because I'm sure the experiences that he had linked into how he started his books and what's the content of them. So what I'll do is I'll introduce tonight's guest and we'll get stuck into those stories. And are you ready?
Yeah, absolutely.
I just muted you by accident. Okay, so tonight on the Writing Community Chat Show, we are joined by a man whose fiction is so grounded in reality, it serves as both a warning and a witness. He is a world-renowned environmental scientist and a freelance journalist who has reported from the front lines of the world's most dangerous regions, from Yemen to Ethiopia, and most recently the battlefields of Ukraine in 2024 and 2025. He is the author of the critically acclaimed The Forcing Trilogy, a series described by the Times as a superbly handled tale of struggle and survival. His debut, The Abrupt Physics of Dying, was a Telegraph Book of the Year, and his non-fiction work, In Hot Water, was recently shortlisted for the 2025 WA Premiers Award. He is joining us at 4 a.m. local time from Western Australia to celebrate the release of the trilogy's epic conclusion, The Hope, that you can see up there. So please give a nice big warm welcome to the visionary Paul E Hardisty. Hello, Paul. How are you doing? Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, guys. It's Saturday morning here, as you said, in Australia. Thanks so much for having me on the program.
You are very, very welcome. There's a little bit of echo. I'm not sure where that's coming from, so if you can hear that, I do apologize. Yes, Paul, honestly, getting up to do the show at such an early time is a real good commitment, and we thank you for it. And we're glad you have awoken on time and joined us, because I probably would not have made it.
Well, I set 2 alarms, so I was determined to be here.
Yes, absolutely. So was there a pre-ritual to joining the show? Was there like a coffee or some breakfast, or were you straight out of bed? I'm ready for this.
Oh, look, I just, woke up and made sure the link worked, and no coffee or anything, water. I'm going to go back to sleep after this. Are you kidding?
Yeah, I don't blame you. Amazing. So what we love to do on the show, Paul, is really dig into the sort of how your road to writing. So that is like how the journey started for you. And I'm sure a lot of your experiences, as I said, led into how you got a lot of your stories out and where the sort of knowledge came from as well. So I'm going to play a very quick video, and then we're going to get into the road to writing. So, Paul, if you can, take us back to kind of where it all started. Do you remember what the first sort of inspiration was, or maybe a memory or the drive for you to start creating writing in terms of fiction or non-fiction as well?
Oh, look, I can remember wanting to be a writer when I was 5 years old, mate. I was, on my old dad's typewriter, typing away at 5 years old, literally, and inspired by Enid Blyton and people like that, even at that young age. And it's always been with me. And then I think I really started taking it seriously. I read like crazy. I had my favorite writers. I always dreamed of living the writer's life, whatever that might look like, depending on who you are. But I had my own pretty romantic, I think, vision of what that might look like, or what it would look like for me. And about 18, I had done my first year of uni, and I quit, and I said, no, I'm going to be a full-time writer. And I, got my notebook and my pencils and started, but pretty quickly realized that it was a complete disaster. Yeah. And the reason is that at 18, I didn't know anything. I had no stories worth telling. I had no life experience. So I decided to kind of go back and get those things right. And it only took me another 30 years, I think, to get to the point where I published my first fiction, my first novel, The About Physics of Dying.
Yeah. What was it like then, taking that leap from university, thinking, this is not what I want to do. I'm going to go and pursue something that I think is right for me. Was it kind of an easy choice for you, or was there kind of disputes with you and your family or friends to do that?
Well, like I said, I did it. I did the full-time writing for about a year, realized that there was nothing there, and went back to uni. I finished my engineering degree, and I put up my hand just to work in all the crazy places. And I think the inspiration is, when I was trying to be that writer and struggling, and I was telling my dad, who's now dead, but it was an amazing guy. I told him, look, this is not working for me. Like, I'm distraught. This is what I want to do. And he said, go to writers and they'll have the answers. And, the first one I went to was Mark Twain, who was the one who originally said that famous line for writers, write what you know. Mm-hmm. And then I realized, okay, don't know anything. Strike one. And then I went to Hemingway. Dad suggested I read Hemingway, who I now love. I think he's my favorite writer. And he loved Twain. He paraphrased that. He said, write what you know and what you really care about. And I realized at 18, I had no clue what I cared about either. So strike two. So I said, okay, forget it. This is not the time for me. I've got to go out there and live. And so I put put my hand up after I got my degree to just go all the crazy places. And I just started working all over the world and getting involved in some, interesting projects and seeing some crazy things happen and meeting some amazing people. And that became the grist for the mill, right? That became the raw material that decades later allowed me to write something that I was happy with.
Paul, what do you think you learned then from reading Twain and Hemingway and then sort of trying to combine your experiences? Because a lot of people that we have on the show, when they first start writing out, they have inspiration from the stories that they've read and then try and create something themselves. So how did you sort of navigate that experience?
Yeah, for me, it's, I've always had a very clear idea of what I wanted to write. And I want to write fiction that comes as close to truth, conveying essential truth as possible. And okay, that might sound kind of grandiose and everything else, but I think that is the purpose of literature. And, I don't know if I'm getting there yet, but I'm certainly determined to try. And so for me, that meant going out and actually experiencing, life in all its plentitude and all its craziness, in all its absurdity and in all its beauty, and trying to convey that, with words and stories. And, that's part of the reason why I've gone to Ukraine 3 times already, since the war started. I'm going again in a few weeks' time to come, face to face and with issues and things that I think really matter, and to try to turn those into stories that are going to not only entertain people, but hopefully make them think.
Yeah, it's amazing what you're doing with your work. And how important do you think books are, not just in general, but kind of, for example, what you're writing? How important do you think they are for people to read?
Well, I'd love it if people would read my work. So thank you for having me on the show and getting, I guess, a little bit of profile with your listenership and your viewership. But I think more importantly, on a higher level, right? The world needs readers. We need people to read. And part of the reason is that, historically, I'm a firm believer that one of the things that brought us out of feudalism was literacy. Right? When people couldn't read, they were easily dominated. They were prey to powerful assertion that wasn't backed up by fact. They were prey to superstition, right? The divine right of kings to rule and all this kind of rubbish. And as soon as people could start to read and their brains became able to assimilate and work on and understand complex and nuanced ideas, they were no longer slaves. And of course it took hundreds of years, but then we eventually threw off feudalism, right? And moved into an era of democracy. But I fear that now, with the smartphone and the, just plummeting literacy rates around the world, the statistics are really, really worrisome. That it's potentially hearkening in a new feudalism, a new era of feudalism, a new area of totalitarianism, which you can see on the rise everywhere. The erosion of democracy, it's happening in front of our eyes, and those are some of the key motivations for the hope. Yeah,
very important topics to touch on. And a difficult job for Chris, who's an English teacher, there, to try and keep that, the importance of literacy in the forefront of the young people's imaginations. What I was going to ask is, a lot of people, when they think they don't know how to write, or they're stuck and they're trying to look for answers, what they'll do is they'll put themselves on a, say, literacy course rather than go and find the experiences like you did. Did that ever cross your mind, or was it always going to be life experience that would benefit you in your stories?
Yeah, I've never taken a creative writing course ever. I think that for some people it's great, right? So I'm not denigrating it at all. I know some really good writers here in WA who are friends of mine who either have done, masters or PhDs in creative writing, or who teach creative writing at university. So I've got amazing respect for them. But for me, for what I wanted to try to do with my literature, with my books, with my fiction and my nonfiction, actually, I believe that for me, that's what works best. And I think that's, for me, the best advice I ever got on writing overall was you've got to find your own path, right? You've got to find what works for you, whether it's the time of day you write or where you find your inspiration, or, finding your own voice. You've got to, you don't want to be copying other people. Now, I know that there's a lot of copycats out there, a lot of copycat literature, but I believe that people who are really serious about it and doing it from passion and from, a good-hearted place are not just doing it for, I don't know, commercial success or whatever. They're doing it because they love it and they care about it and they've got something important to tell. And I think if you do that, then you want to be yourself. And I think Martin Amis, the wonderful British writer who just died, he loved Twain and Hemingway as well. And he sort of took their two pieces of advice and added to it and I'm paraphrasing, but he said, the other thing you got to do is be yourself, right? Because everyone else is already taken.
Yeah, nice. Interesting you mentioned, obviously going back to Ukraine and having been there twice already. How is being in places like that and seeing sort of society dealing with collapse of infrastructure and just with everything that's going on there, how did that, or has it influenced how you sort of complete the trilogy and, finishing up The Hope, which is coming out on the 29th?
Oh yeah, completely, right? Because the first time I went was 2022. And then again in 24 and then in 25. So I've been 3 times and one other one coming up, and for pretty substantial periods of time, like a month, right? A month and a half on my own. Got a press pass from the Ukrainian Armed Forces and literally just low profile because it's dangerous, just local hotels and just traveling all across the country, meeting soldiers and refugees and going to military hospitals and going to the front line and just witnessing, right? Bearing witness and having a lot of time to think and process about what's going on and writing as I go, right? Try to write every day, one way or the other. I've been posting stories on my Substack, both little short stories, but also pieces of essay. And look, for me, I don't know. I think authenticity in writing is really important. It's really important to me. And I can feel satisfied that what I'm doing is authentic. It's real. It comes close to trying to capture these essential truths that I think all of us, if you're a human being and a thinking human being, you're always trying to find some sort of truth in your life, right? At different times, it might be about different things, but I think coming face to face with the kind of trauma that you see every day in Ukraine, it's deeply, deeply moving, deeply affecting. And frankly, the courage and the stoicism which the Ukrainian people are demonstrating every day is just an inspiration.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris?
I was going to say then, Paul, how do you take those experiences that you're having and turn it into fiction and know what to leave in and what to take out and what to sort of put in to sort of entertain and carry the narrative and the story that you're trying to tell?
Yeah, well, I think, you're an English teacher. I guess like all writers, I'm still learning. I'm still trying to find the best way to do that. I kind of like Hemingway's iceberg principle. I think a lot of it is what you leave out. I think what you want to do is create the depth so that if you put the reader in the location, if you really work hard on immediacy, right? Trying to take the reader with the sights and the smells and the sounds and the tactile feelings that they're experiencing and make it immediate so that they can almost be there, then a lot of what you're trying to get across will hopefully come just through that immediacy, and then the telling of the story. You don't need to be pontificating too much and, being too didactic. And I also believe in the show don't tell thing, right? I try to have a lot more show than tell in my fiction and my nonfiction. Frankly, I try to write my nonfiction like a bit of a narrative with characters and a story, so that people want to read it because they want to find out what's going to happen next, and they care about the characters, and they're invested in the subject, and they're invested in the story. So yeah, all of that I think is really important when you're trying to get it across. I think for me, with something like Ukraine or something like climate change, right? One of the themes and of background themes, I guess, of the Forcing, the Descent, the Hope, the trilogy there, is that these are really, really serious issues for me anyway, and I think for many people in the world. And so my fear is always that I'm not going to do them justice, right? That I'm going to somehow trivialize them by fictionalizing them and by making them into a story that's supposed to be entertaining and fun to read, right? You don't want to in any way diminish or not respect the subject. That's the hardest thing for me. So I try really, really hard to make sure that I'm not erring on that side of, taking something that's really serious and really important and kind of just gutting it for entertainment and not honoring just how serious the subject matter is.
How difficult is it? Sorry, Chris, I was just going to say, how difficult is it to do that if you set in a book, like, what are we, 60 years in the future, just shy? Like, trying to get that balance right of doing it justice, but also trying to think forward in time and what the world could look like at that time and paint that picture for the reader without, I'm trying to think of like different texts like The Road, when you've got this sort of like the world's gone crazy and it's just gone horrifically for everyone. Like, how do you do that and manage that, looking into the future, but also trying to appeal to readers now?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one, isn't it? And I think every writer is going to have their own take on how to do it. But for me, I think it's partly about, two things. One is that human emotion, I think, and humanity itself as a concept, as an idea, in the best possible sense, is timeless. And so I think you have to rely on the reader to understand that whether you're in 1880 or 2080, human beings fundamentally understand, I believe, innately good and evil, and right and wrong to a certain extent. And society changes and rules change and social conventions change, but there's some pretty fundamental aspects to those concepts that I think are timeless. And so that's one way of grounding a story, even if it's set in 65 years or 55 years, like The Hope is, a couple of generations hence. And the other one is, for me, that I don't want to embellish too much. I think if you stick to the story and don't try to over complicate and the story, and don't, I don't know, paint it with a flourish, if you know what I mean, then I think that it's much more likely to land and resound as plausible and realistic. And look, that's what I'm trying for. You do your best, and you trust that it'll resonate with readers.
Yeah, nice. I was going to mention, you mentioned about your nonfiction, and in your book Hot Water, you talk about your time as a CEO at the Australian Institute of Marine Science. And in the Forcing, your protagonist David is known as the teacher, or as teacher, because of his scientific background. So how much of your character was placed into your fictional character? Was there much of that consciously happening, or was it kind of just naturally flown into that?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I'm not sure that I know the answer much beyond, write what you know. You got to
Mm.
write what you know about, and I've spent my whole career really working on science and engineering and scientific research, almost completely in the environmental and water resource sectors. So these are subjects that I know a lot about, right? I know a lot about the oceans, and I know a lot about natural ecosystems and about climate systems, and so yeah, those find their way into my books one way or another.
So in terms of that scientific research you've done, for someone like me and Chris, maybe who are not really, who haven't relatively inexperienced in all of that stuff, is there a piece of information or fact or something you discovered along that journey that really surprised you or amazed you that you could share with us in the science world?
Yeah, well, I think from talking about the hope today, right? I think the interesting thing about looking into the future and running a trend, okay, on let's say climate. So all I basically did for this trilogy is I took what the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the big international body that draws together and summarizes all of the available science from around the world, all the best institutions, science academies from around the world, is that if you run a business as usual emissions scenario forward, there are amazingly detailed and so far have proven to be very robust scientific projections for what the world will look like. Now, what I mean by that is what ecosystems will look like, what temperatures will be doing, what the oceans will be doing, that kind of thing, right? Not necessarily how human societies will respond, but the scientific response of the climate system and the Earth system and the biosphere that it supports. And so all I really did was take that knowledge and then put a bunch of characters in that world and let it run forward. And one of the things that really surprised me when I talked to some of my colleagues who I know really well, who are some of the best climate scientists and climatologists and ecologists in the world, one-on-one, right? As I was doing this work and following up in more detail, was that there are going to be these refugia. There are going to be these places on the world on the planet that are going to be relatively less affected, where you're going to have better climatic conditions, where you're going to have okay rainfall, where you're going to have less of the extreme weather events that you might see in other places, and that these will be little pockets of I'm talking about in the distant future if things get really bad, but there will be places that are livable, and there'll be a lot of other places that are really, really difficult to live in. And so I took that concept and used it throughout all three novels.
Yeah, it must be, they talk about ignorance is bliss, quoting the Matrix movie back in the day. But, for people to know about what could happen, is that something that is everyone should know, or is that something that the people who can make a difference should know? Or do you think it's something that everybody should know about?
Oh, look, everybody should know it, right? But and that's one of the reasons I'm writing these books, because I do know about it. I've been on the very leading edge of the research and the science for a long time, and I know a lot of the people who are working this area, and I can tell you that scientists around the world are incredibly frustrated because they spent decades trying to sort of warn the general public, and in particular brief politicians. And I've been there, like I've been to Senate estimates, and I've briefed senior politicians about what's going on. And to see the appalling lack of urgency and real movement on some of these critical issues is really, really depressing. And a lot of scientists are, pulling their hair out, wondering, like, what do we have to do to get people to understand just how serious this is? And I think what I've found is that far more people are listening to what I have to say on this subject through my fiction than ever did through my nonfiction or my, you know, peer-reviewed scientific papers or briefing senior politicians, right? Textbooks and stuff like that. People love stories. And so my whole idea on these, with this trilogy, is to write a real, you know, hopefully a crackingly good read, a thriller with good characters that you can invest in and want to go on the ride with. And then at the end, you're kind of going, oh, well, okay, yeah, there was this big issue that I've maybe come face to face with, and it's making me think about it. So that's the intention.
You know, I think you're right there in terms of story, because you look at the sensational hit show Adolescence, which focuses on a young person's trauma and behavior. There's probably many papers written about that kind of behavior and trauma effect on a child. And not many people probably would have dove into that and experienced understood it, whereas that show has gone international and everyone now knows a bit more about that and may be interested because of it. So I think it is just the human nature, or the majority of people, to consume that way. And if going through fiction is making people see that message more, then I think, you know, you're obviously onto a good thing with this series.
Well, if what you're saying is that I've got to get on Netflix, and I hope so, fingers crossed.
Absolutely.
Maybe they'll pick it up. If you guys are listening out there, consider it. Thanks.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to say, Paul, how much sort of weight do you feel when you get a press pass in a place like Ukraine to sort of showcase and share the experiences of the people there? Because from what you've been saying about, you know, your scientific background and almost shouting into the void, I should imagine it's a very similar experience being in Ukraine and telling people about these experiences and not quite getting the response of, you know, some people may see it on your Substack and have a heightened awareness, but the message probably still isn't getting out there as much as it should. So I suppose the weight of the science and the weight of the press pass, how much does that sort of bear in your mind and your thinking when you're there?
Oh, look, I mean, it's a great question, Chris. And the best way I can answer it is to say that it weighs on me all the time. Like, I feel a heavy burden of responsibility, and I'm trying my very best to discharge that responsibility. And yeah, in the Ukraine and you know, even in places like Yemen, I was there in the 90s, you know, a very violent place, very poor. And you're almost bearing witness to the calamities of history that are occurring. And yeah, writing The Abrupt Physics of Dying, my first novel, was all based on those experiences in Yemen in the 90s, you know, outbreak of civil war and all kinds of violence and horrible human outcomes on every level. And yeah, like, it really weighs on you and you want to try and do it justice. And so that's why sometimes I'm working with some popular nonfiction as well every once in a while, because some of it you don't want to, I don't know, you don't want to fictionalize. You want to put it straight into a factual account. And that's so either way, you're bearing witness, right? You're telling stories that need to be told that a lot of people otherwise would never hear. And I think it frustrates my publisher sometimes, Chris, to be honest, because, you know, I don't want to write stuff that's just easy. You know, I'm not writing a cozy. and so I'm glad, you know, thanks for having me on the podcast because of that, right? I'm not writing something that you can curl up with a, you know, nice cup of tea and there's a little murder and it's kind of off camera. And then, you know, the little detective comes in or the detective partnerships, the guy and the girl, and they solve it and everything's happy and society wins in the end and the bad guys get locked up. You know, that's not what I'm writing. I'm writing, look, this is real. It's happening. It's pretty, can I swear on your show or not?
Yep.
I rarely do, but, you know, it's pretty fucked up and people need to know about it and need to come face to face with it. And that makes it hard to read sometimes, right? But I believe that it's important to challenge readers, and I have faith in readers as well. Like I have faith that people can read the hard stuff and that they're going to be tough enough to take it. Right? They're not just going to melt. They're not going to get all upset or offended by some tough information about some tough subjects, delivered in a sensitive, I think that's the best way I can answer that question. It's a tough one.
Yeah, nice. So change it up slightly, and then we'll go on to round 2, which is what's the story. I read that you were a pilot and a sailor. Is that correct?
Yeah, I haven't flown for a long time, but I was very passionate about it for quite a long time. And it just sort of caught up with me. It's one of those things, you can't do everything in life. I'm a pretty ruthless prioritizer. When I'm really set on doing something, I kind of want to push everything else out, or a lot of other things out. I'm willing to make the sacrifices. And that was one of the things that had to be given up when I was, raising my family and stuff like that. Just super expensive. I got to the point where I was starting to do my commercial and my instrument, and I just realized that with technology and stuff, you're kind of a glorified bus driver in the end, and it wasn't what I wanted to do for a living. It's pretty cool, and I've always had that romantic streak in me, and I thought, now, like, being a writer will be way cooler than being like I say, an air bus driver. And like sailing for me is the same, but I love technical challenge. I love navigation. I love maps. I love exploring. For me, sailing is still like a big passion, and I love that feeling of freedom and independence and being able to go where I want to go.
So with exploring in mind as well, if say me, yourself and Chris were on an island exploring, and something terrible happened on the island, it was gonna, I don't know, explode, and you had the choice of a plane or a ship or a boat to take us and escape with, which would you choose to escape with?
Oh, I think if it was just the three of us,
yeah.
I don't know you well enough to answer that question very well, but hey, listen, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. I'll give me the benefit of the doubt in your minds, and I'll say a boat, because we can get off and we can get off the island that's going to explode, and we can spend some time together. And if it is tropical, we can have a great time and do some fishing and have a few beers and get to know each other before we get to the destination.
Wow.
And it won't just be a 6-hour watch a few movies, but we can actually get to know each other and do some living.
That's a very entertaining escape. I was thinking, just get out of there quickly, and you've got a whole trip planned. That's amazing. I love that.
I love traveling. I love exploring.
Amazing. What we're going to do, we're going to go onto round 2, which is what's the story, and we're going to hear about what's been called the most explosive, utterly compelling, must-read climate emergency thriller of 2026, which I said is released on January the 29th. It's Thursday next week for us in the UK. I believe Friday, Paul, for you in Australia. So when we come back from this little video, if you could give us a little pitch for this book, The Hope. Can you do that for us when we come back?
Okay.
Yeah. And we'll get a few questions about The Hope. So what's the story? Coming right up. That finished quickly. So Paul, what The Hope? Could you tell us all about The Hope, please?
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. Well, look, it's 2082, and the protagonist, or one of the main protagonists, Becky, everyone calls her Boo, who's a 16-year-old girl, is living in Tasmania with her uncle and aunt. She is one of the descendants of Teacher, the original protagonist of the Forcing, which starts in 2039. And in that, I won't give it away too much, but he's part of the older generation that is blamed for the cataclysm that befell the world. And in a regime of institutionalized ageism, has all his property confiscated and is sent south to what was supposed to be equivalent accommodation and turns out to be essentially some sort of concentration camp. Anyway, he escapes, and Boo is one of his descendants. In fact, his son, Lockie, also shows up in the Hope. And in 2082, the world has massively contracted in terms of the human world, right? So the planet, large tracts of the planet are no longer hospitable or habitable. The world's population has plummeted to less than 1 billion. It's a lonely, windswept world where slowly you can start to see signs that nature is recovering, but not in the ways, it's not going back to what it was, but it's starting to recover. Just hints of that. And Boo has this amazing gift. She can memorize entire books. She's got a photographic memory. She reads it once and she remembers it. Now, people like that do exist, actually. They're very rare, but they do actually exist. So it's not completely, out of the realm of possibility. But one of the things that's happened is these final refugia that remain in the world have all been bought up and taken over by the super rich and the oligarchs and the autocrats that sort of propagated the cataclysm in the first place. And they now live as almost the pharaohs did, right? As eminences in a new feudalism, which we talked about earlier in the program. And Becky and her family are essentially part of that, feudal state. They are chattel, they're serfs, like everybody else. And one of the things that keeps everybody in check and keeps everybody in their place is that nobody knows, most people don't know how to read anymore. Books have all been confiscated, they're illegal. And she and her uncle and aunt have started this secret library where they're saving the few books that they find and that people, have hidden away. And so they've created this secret library. And so that's sort of the start of the book, is that she's growing up in this dark specter of a massively changed world. And the other thread of the book is that her uncle starts to behave very strangely. And, I won't give it away, but it turns out that he's writing a biography. And he's writing a biography of his stepfather's son, who is Lockie Ashworth, teacher's son, who at one point in the series becomes president of the United States and Canada. By that point, Canada is part of the United States. Now, that was all set up before Trump got elected and started talking about this, by the way, and I am Canadian, so it deeply affects me. So he starts to write an autobiography of this guy, Lockie Ashworth, and this provides a retrospective for a pathway for hope. Like, what could we have done? What should we do? And what could we have done to prevent the catastrophe? And in the sense of Boo and her life, what do we do? What do we need to do to throw off this yoke, right? To rebel and to find our way to some sort of hopeful future. So it kind of plays that same idea of hope resonates across the book and across the series with the one series of discussions and events. So that would be the best way I can characterize sort of what happens in the book, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You'll have to find out. Are they successful? Are she and her cousin Leo, who's Kweku's son, are they successful in fighting off the yoke of feudalism, of toppling this horrific regime? Or are they just going to, be another statistic?
Amazing. Anya in the comments says, this book sounds amazing. I'm going to get it. And Halo says, it sounds phenomenal. I got that word out. Thank you for those comments. My question is based on, this is the ending of a trilogy. how is your feeling approaching the release of this book, knowing that obviously you've got readers there who have gone through book 1 and 2, and then this is the end for them? Is it kind of like a release for you, or is there pressure built up to this? How are you feeling as an author approaching this release date?
I'm feeling trepidation, because every time a book comes out, you're not sure how readers are going to respond to it. You know, you get so close that you can't see it anymore and you can't judge. So I hope that the readers who wrote in, or your listeners who just made comments, was it Halo and somebody else, great name, I hope they enjoy it. And I hope they feel that it was a worthy ending to the trilogy. I did get some really good feedback a couple of days ago from a few readers that said that they read it as a one-off. They hadn't read the first 2 and they loved it. So that makes me feel good, because it can be read as a standalone. You can start here and then go back to fill in, to find out what happened and how they got to that world and those kinds of things. Or you can read it as a trilogy. But look, I feel a great sense of responsibility to my readers, that if I've set something up and, you know, promised a trilogy, that the quality and the level of effort and the level of thought, and the ethos and the look and the feel of the book are right. You know, that it fits together. I'm always trying to produce something that's the best I can possibly make it. So that, I do feel that weight of responsibility.
And Paul, was the plan always to do a trilogy? And I suppose this is a twofold question. Is this like an original trilogy, or is this like a Star Wars trilogy where we're going to get 3 original and then a prequel trilogy, and then let's not talk about the next bit of Star Wars, but yeah. Have you got the scope to do that potentially?
My sons are huge Star Wars fans, and boy, listening to them rant about, you know, ever since Disney, blah, blah, blah. I hear that a lot from them. No, look, there was the trilogy there from the beginning. Whether or not the first one was received well enough to warrant it, you never know, but it was. You know, the Forcing, I think, was received pretty well, and a lot of people liked it, and a lot of people resonated with them. And so, I think the trilogy was on, and there is no Star Wars other books around this that I can see right now. You know, unless I do get a call from the Netflix exec who's been listening and calls me up and says, "Listen, you know what? If you write a 4th one, then we'll definitely make this into a series." Then I'd think about it, right? But I've got other things I want to do now. I've got more years behind me probably than ahead of me. And every time, you know, you go to somewhere like Ukraine, you always, like, I mean, I'm not trying to be dramatic, but, you know, you just never know, right? So I've got things that I want to write now, new things. I got a lot of other ideas that I want to work on, and it's time to move on to those now.
Yeah. Can I just ask about this cover? Because it is outstanding, and it really does, it pops. How much input did you have into this?
Well, if you have copies around of the first 2, the Forcing and the Descent, you'll see that it's definitely a theme, right? You can see that they're a series. Kid Ethic, I think, does all of Arenda, or does my covers for Arenda books, and he came up with the first one, the Forcing. It's orange. It's got an orange cover, and there's a hand like this.
Yeah.
And inside the hand are a silhouette of people. And, you know, if you think about the title, The Forcing, it was very deliberate. There's a little excerpt in the very front of the book that defines forcing as a scientific term in terms of radiative forcing and watts per square meter, which is what drives heat accumulation in the atmosphere. Okay, so you've got the forcing of the atmosphere. But then, of course, you read the book, and I don't know if you guys have, but if you read the book, there's a lot of other kinds of forcing going on, from gentle forcing to the most heinous types of forcing that you can imagine. And so I loved the cover. We all thought it was pretty cool. It's all painted, by the way, on 100% recyclable and recycled materials. So it's actually printed in a very unusual way. 99% of books out there you can't recycle because of the ink and the glue. But my books you can completely recycle. Now, I'm not urging everybody to throw them all into the recycling bin. I hope they keep them on their shelves and read them and pass them on. But I just wanted to make that point, right, for a book that's yeah, there it is. So you can see the hand. Okay, beautiful. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, no worries.
So when it came for the hope, I wanted a color that was hopeful. I love ocean water swimming, cold water swimming. I'm you know, a marine, worked a long time in marine science and sailing, so I wanted blue. So I said, could it be blue? And the other thing, as I said, is on this time, right, this is the fight back part of the trilogy. We're fighting back here. This is hope. And I said, you know, I'm a fighter too. I'm not very good. You know, I lose a lot, 5 broken noses, but, you know, I wanted a fist in there. And we played around with different concepts. So the color and the fist were my idea, but the concept of the whole of the trilogy was kid ethic. And yeah, they do great work. He does great work.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Okay, we got a couple of questions popping in. So if you do have questions for Paul, please do put them in the chat now. We're going to go into the final part, which is round 3, community questions. That's the time where you can ask your questions. We did send a couple of staple questions ahead of time, some of which were a bit tricky. So we'll see if we can get an answer for them or not. And yeah, we'll get your questions up on the screen as well. So please do send those in. And here is round 3. So I'll give them a go, Paul. If you're not too confident with the question, you can always skip them, but have a go. If you could take any story, any character from the world of fiction and put that character into your novels, or say take them on an adventure, an exploration or whatever, what character from fiction would you take? And that can be a TV show, a movie, or a film, or a book.
Yeah, this is a curly one. I'm going to go with Lady Brett from Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises, who, if you've read that book, is an unforgettable female character, beguiling, crazy, independent, and yeah, I just fell in love with her when I first read it in my early 20s, and when I reread it in my 50s, I fell in love with her all over again. And I actually, you know what? I'm gonna use a modern day version of her in my Ukraine book, I think.
Nice.
Yeah, the next sort of staple question that we have is, if you could change the ending to any fiction, what would you change the ending to, and what would you do with it?
Oh yeah, you know, my initial answer is I highly respect anyone who writes a book or gets a movie produced or whatever, and yeah, I don't think I'd feel qualified to change anyone else's ending. Endings are really personal. They're really important. I wouldn't want to mess with it, but I can tell you that one ending that broke my heart was Jude the Obscure by Thomas Hardy. Again, maybe, you know, not quite just mainstream fiction now. It's more classic, but if you've ever read that book, oh my God, the ending is so tragic. And, you know, I really thought Jude was awesome. And I wanted him to have a different future than the one, I won't spoil it, but the one that was given him by Thomas Hardy, the master.
Yeah, I'm sure it's been out long enough, but there you go. Let me change it up a little bit then. If as an adventurer, someone asked advice that was going on an adventure for the first time, what 3 essential items would you tell them to take?
Oh, items.
Yeah, 3 things.
Number 1. Yeah, okay. So number 1, a book. Like, bring a book that you love. because you're going to have a lot of time curled up on train station benches or in bunkers or dugouts or on a deck of a ship under the stars, and you're going to want to reconnect with the best writing that you've ever read, right? Do you know what I mean? The things that are really close to you, the book that's really close to you. So wherever I go, wherever I am, I always carry a book, a real one, like not a Kindle, but like a physical book. And I'll read every night before I go to bed, wherever I am, whatever I'm doing, just about. So number 2 would be a notebook and a pencil for me, right? Write it down, because you always think, oh, that's so vivid. That's so, amazing. I'll never forget it. But you do.
Yeah.
And time goes on and you do. And, one of my novels called Turbulent Wake was actually just a series of short stories from recollections, my notebooks that I'd kept since I was 18, traveling over. A notebook and a pencil, and look, the third thing is, because I'm a pragmatist, and a really good knife.
Yes, brilliant. Chris, do you want to finish us up with the final staple question, and then I'll get one in from the audience?
Yeah. So the final staple question that we have is a little bit morbid, but obviously you said about facing the darkness. You're on your deathbed. You're looking back at your writing career. What would you be happy with? What is success to you?
Yeah, look, I'm happy now. I've already had to have that conversation with myself several times, and yeah, I've been really lucky in my life. I've had amazing people in my life, friends, lovers, a wife, soulmate, and I have already had more than I can probably claim to deserve. So I'm good now. I'm good to go. If I have to check out now, I'm ready.
Love that. Great. What was I going to say then? Okay, we've got a question from Anya, so we'll ask this question, and I'll try not to say things wrongly. What is your favorite Ukrainian food? I love borscht and pierogoni, which sound
Borscht.
Yes.
Yeah, both borscht and pierogi. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, and the thing is, the borscht you get, the best borscht I've ever had, I got to tell you, is in a small, sort of, half ruined house near Kramatorsk. You can look it up on near the front line in Ukraine, cooked by a 25-year-old conscript who was assigned to a very now close friend of mine who heads up a military intelligence unit operating behind, right within the kill zone. And it was November and it was cold and we had just been out and we came back and that was the best borscht I've ever had. Amazing. Great question. Thank you.
Yeah. So that would be your favorite then?
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah. You wouldn't think that cabbage soup would be something that could be so delicious, but when it's done right, it is to die for.
And how do you pronounce the bit at the end there, which some they call Vareniki?
Vareniki. I can't read it. It's too small for me to read. Oh, okay. But there's Pierogi or Vareniki? Yeah.
Varenyky.
Yeah, it's pronounced different ways in different parts of Ukraine as well. But yeah, those are delicious.
Right. Thank you, Anya, for that question. Fantastic. Okay, we've got literally a couple of minutes left. So what I want to ask is, where can people? You mentioned Substack. So where can they go to find out? To find your articles, to read your Substacks, to buy obviously your books and The Hope, which is coming out on the 29th. Where's the best place for them to go and find all those great things?
Well, look, The Hope will be available if you're listening in the UK. It'll be available starting, January the 29th in Waterstones and your, independent bookstores. I'm a big fan of small independent bookstores, by the way. Right? They are sort of lifeblood and the pulse, I think, of literature now, because they particularly make an effort to stock stuff that isn't just your big publishers, top 10, force it into the system kind of books, right? They will take the time to discover authors from smaller publishers or who aren't as well known, but who have something to offer. So yeah, check out your local independent bookseller. It's available. It'll be available as an audiobook, and also, you know, from any of the online booksellers.
Yeah,
was
amazing.
Was that the question? Yeah.
Yeah. And what about you mentioned articles and things you write. So essays, are they available for people to read?
Yeah, so I post every week. I try to post just about every week on my Substack channel. My Substack channel is called Bite on the Nail, which is a saying of Hemingway's about writing. You guys probably heard this one, right? He says, whatever happens the night before, you love to have a good drink and a good time, right? Whatever happens the night before, whatever you've done, every morning you get up and you bite on the nail. And what he meant by that is you have the discipline to do the hard work and get up and write, no matter how bad you feel or no matter what's happened the day before. So my Substack is called Bite on the Nail, and I write about books, about reading, about conflict, about the environment, and about sort of trying to stay sane and hopeful in a crazy world.
Yeah.
And post some original short stories. The most recent one I posted was called what was it called? Nowhere to Hide. And it was about being with a group of soldiers on the front line.
Amazing. Well, people that are still watching right at the end, thank you so much for doing so. And for those that tuned in along the way, if you're watching it back or listening back, thank you so much. Please do feel free to drop us a message on social media, leave a comment in the video in the comments. And if we've got any follow-up questions for Paul, we could send them to him on an email if he doesn't mind, and he might be able to send you answers based on that. But please do go and follow him and pick up the book that is out on the 29th. As he said, you don't have to read the first two, but if you're picking up that one, you may as well pick up the whole trilogy, right?
Yeah. Can I just say one more thing? Sorry, I forgot. My Substack, there's no paywall. So if you want to read everything I have for free, you can. Some people generously contribute, but I don't paywall, so it's all free.
Nice.
So you can subscribe for free.
What I'll do is I'll find that link and put it in the description of this once I've updated it, so you can find it there if you can't find it yourself. And so from me, thank you very much, Paul. You've been fantastic to talk to. The stories you must have a massive stories to tell. But what you've told us tonight is really helpful and insightful. And thank you so much for me.
Well, thank you guys so much for having me on the program. And I wish you guys both the best of luck. And who knows, maybe we can take that sailing trip one day and have a beer.
Yeah, that would be great, wouldn't it? Anything from you, Chris?
No, it's been brilliant, Paul. Absolute pleasure to chat to you, and good luck in Ukraine.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah.
Likewise.
Yeah. Bye. Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend. Look after yourselves. Bye.